My heart pounded like a drum, and my vision blurred as I read the email subject line. Urgent. Your college fund has been drained. In that instant, the promise of my future, the money I had painstakingly saved for tuition, books, and a chance at a better life, crumbled before my eyes. I could almost hear my father's dismissive laugh echoing in my mind. How could the man who once swore to support my dreams stoop so low? I felt betrayal, anger, and a piercing sense of loss all at once. And then I vowed silently, I would make him regret every dollar he stole from my future. I still remember the quiet evenings of my childhood when my father, Robert, would sit me on his lap in our modest living room, telling me stories of his own youth and promising that education was the key to a better life. He was a hardworking man who had built his small business from scratch, and he often said that he would do anything to secure my future. When I received my acceptance letter to a prestigious university, I believed I was stepping into the bright future he'd always envisioned for me. My college fund, a modest savings account he'd nurtured over the years, was meant to be my launch pad, a gift from a father who cared. I never doubted his love. But then, as I entered my freshman year with hopes as high as the sky, things began to unravel. I noticed a subtle change in his demeanor. Conversations became curt and guarded. He started coming home later than usual, his eyes clouded with worry, and there were whispers on the phone I wasn't meant to overhear. I chalked it up to the burdens of running a business during a tough economic time, never suspecting that behind those worried eyes lay a secret that would shatter my world. One day after classes, I received a terse email from my bank stating that nearly all the money in my college fund had been withdrawn and transferred to an account with no explanation. My heart sank. I frantically searched my emails and text messages, trying to find any clue, any explanation. Nothing made sense. I called the bank and a somber voice confirmed the transactions. My hands trembled as I read the details. Withdrawals totaling over $40,000, meant to cover tuition, had been sent out in a single day. The shock was overwhelming. I confronted my father that very evening. In our cramped kitchen, lit by the dim glow of a single overhead light, I demanded to know what was happening. His face, usually so composed, contorted with a mix of guilt and defiance. I had debts, sweetheart, he said quietly, avoiding my eyes. I had to pay them off. It wasn't supposed to hurt you. His words were a feeble excuse that echoed hollowly in the space between us. I felt anger burn inside me, an anger that was not just for the money, but for the betrayal of trust, the theft of my future. I cried, screaming that I had sacrificed everything for my education and that he had taken it all away without a second thought. In the days that followed, I was forced to scramble for alternative funding. I applied for emergency loans, sought out scholarships at the last minute, and even took on a grueling part-time job to cover the shortfall. Each rejection, each anxious conversation with financial aid officers, reminded me of the father who had once promised to secure my future. His betrayal was not just a financial wound, it was a deep, searing cut to my self-esteem and my trust in the man who was supposed to be my guiding light. Yet as the shock began to wear off, a new determination took root. I vowed that I would not let his selfishness define my destiny. I began to channel my anger into action. I met with my university's financial aid office and presented my case, armed with bank statements and a detailed timeline of the unauthorized transactions. Their sympathetic faces and reassurances that they would do everything possible to help sparked a glimmer of hope. I also reached out to a close mentor, Professor Alvarez, who had always believed in my potential. He encouraged me not to see this as an end but as a challenge, a call to prove that I could succeed despite being robbed of the funds that were meant to propel me forward. In parallel, I began to document every conversation, every email exchange with my father regarding the missing funds. I needed to understand how he could justify such an act. Late one night, as I sat by my desk with the glow of my computer illuminating tear-streaked pages of my journal, I wrote, "I trusted you, Dad. I believed in you. And now, because of your debts, my dreams are on the line. But I will fight. I will rebuild what you tried to steal from me." That letter became my mantra, a promise to myself that I would reclaim my future no matter what it took. With the support of my mentor and a newfound resolve, I began to secure alternative funding for my education. I applied for grants, won a prestigious scholarship after a grueling interview process, and even managed to secure a small loan with the help of a community program dedicated to supporting underprivileged students. Slowly, I pieced together enough resources to cover my tuition, though the loss of my college fund had set me back by an entire academic year. It was a bitter pill to swallow, yet I knew that every setback was also an opportunity to grow stronger. The legal battle that ensued was as much about my education as it was about confronting my father's betrayal. I sought legal advice to determine if I could hold him accountable for his actions. My attorney, Ms. Robinson, was a no-nonsense woman who had built her practice on cases of financial and emotional betrayal. She listened to my story with a steely gaze and assured me that, while the law might not restore my lost funds entirely, there were avenues to seek restitution. We discussed the possibility of suing for breach of fiduciary duty and emotional distress. Although the prospect of a legal battle terrified me, I knew that I couldn't let him off the hook so easily. "You took away my future, Dad," I told her, voice shaking with a mix of sorrow and determination. "I'm going to make him regret it." As the legal proceedings began, I found myself revisiting every painful memory, every conversation where his eyes had darted away, every excuse about needing the money for emergencies, every time I'd seen him glance at his phone with a guilty look. I poured all of that into my testimony, detailing how his actions had not only derailed my college plans but had also eroded the trust one had in him. The courtroom was a sterile arena where emotions and facts collided. I felt exposed, vulnerable, yet strangely empowered as I recounted my story. The judge listened, and while she expressed sympathy, she also warned me that legal battles are often long and draining. But I was resolved, I would see this through to the end. At home, the fallout from my father's betrayal rippled through the family. My siblings, who had always been caught in the middle of our parents' arguments, were divided. My younger brother, Jason, who had idolized our father, was in shock, unable to comprehend how the man he looked up to could do something so hurtful. My mother, overwhelmed with grief and shame, barely spoke a word. The family dinners that once brought us together turned into cold silences and tense glares. I tried to reach out to Jason, to console him and to make him understand that our father's actions were his own, not a reflection of our worth. But the rift was deep, and I feared that the trust we once had was irreparably damaged. Days turned into weeks, and as my education slowly resumed, I began to see glimmers of success. My grades improved as I threw myself into my studies, fueled by a mix of determination and the burning desire to prove that I was more than the sum of my father's betrayals. I formed a close bond with a group of fellow students who recognized my resilience and admired my strength. We spent long nights in the library sharing our dreams and fears, and I found solace in knowing that I wasn't alone in facing life's harsh realities. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of classes and part-time work, I received an unexpected call from my younger brother. Jason's voice was hesitant at first, then shaky with emotion. "Sis," he said softly, "I'm so sorry about Dad. I didn't know what to do. I always thought he was doing what he had to do to keep us afloat." His words, laced with regret, made my heart ache. I realized that while I had been fighting to reclaim my future, my brother was still trapped in a cycle of guilt and confusion. I promised him that I would do everything in my power to make things right, not just for me but for all of us. "I'll make him regret it, Jason," I said firmly. "Not just in court but in a way that he can't ignore. You deserve better and so do I." The legal process dragged on, each court date a grueling reminder of the years lost and the dreams deferred. I spent countless hours with Ms. Robinson, reviewing deposit slips, bank statements, and every piece of evidence that linked my father to the unauthorized withdrawals. Slowly, the case began to take shape, a testament to the meticulous work of gathering truth from betrayal. There were moments when I doubted whether justice would be served, when the weight of it all threatened to crush me. But every time I felt that despair creeping in, I recalled the promise I had made to myself on that sleepless night by the computer, and I found the strength to press on. Throughout this period, I also focused on building my own future. I took on extra freelance work, designed logos for small businesses, and even began tutoring younger students in graphic design. The extra income wasn't much compared to what I had lost, but it was a symbol of my resilience and my refusal to be defined by my father's selfish actions. Slowly, my bank account began to stabilize, and with every paycheck, I felt a measure of vindication. I wasn't going to let his greed dictate my life. I was determined to rise above it all. Then one chilly morning, a breakthrough came. Ms. Robinson managed to secure a preliminary ruling in my favor, a legal acknowledgement that my father had indeed breached his fiduciary duty by draining my college fund without my consent. The ruling didn't immediately restore my funds, but it was a monumental step in the right direction. I felt a surge of hope as I shared the news with Jason and a few close friends. "This is just the beginning," I told him, my voice steady despite the lingering pain. "I'm going to make him regret every single dollar he stole from my future." As summer approached, the legal battle continued in the background, but I began to reclaim control over my life. I enrolled in a summer internship with a reputable design firm, determined to prove that I was capable of achieving greatness on my own. The experience was both challenging and exhilarating, and I soon found myself thriving in a competitive environment where my ideas were valued. I made new friends, mentors, and even secured a few promising job offers that hinted at a bright future. Each success was a silent rebuke to my father's betrayal, a message that my worth wasn't defined by his greed. During this time, I also took a long, hard look at our family dynamics. I realized that my father's actions were not just about money, they were symptomatic of a man who had allowed his own failures and debts to cloud his judgment. I had grown up idolizing him, trusting that he would always be there to support me. But the harsh reality was that his priorities had shifted, and in doing so, he had betrayed the very essence of what a parent should be. I grappled with a mix of sorrow, anger, and even a strange pity for the man who had let his own demons drive him to such extremes. One evening, after another exhausting day of court sessions and work, I sat in my small apartment, the silence punctuated only by the hum of the city outside my window. I opened my journal and began to write about everything: the pain, the betrayal, the loss, and the growing determination to rebuild my life. I wrote about the mountain of dreams that had been swept away by one callous act, and about the promise I made to myself that I would reclaim every ounce of my future, no matter how hard it might be. My handwriting, shaky at first, grew steadier with each word, as if the act of writing was stitching my broken heart back together. Months passed. The legal battle, though arduous, began to yield positive results. My father was forced to reimburse a portion of the stolen funds as part of a settlement that acknowledged the breach of trust. While the amount recovered did not fully restore my college fund, it was a symbolic victory, a recognition that his actions had consequences. The court's decision also mandated that he attend financial counseling and that I be granted the rights to make all future financial decisions regarding any remaining family assets. It was a bittersweet outcome, one that validated my pain and my fight, even as it left deep scars. Simultaneously, my academic career resumed with renewed vigor. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make the most of the opportunities that had been so nearly taken from me. I received accolades from professors and fellow students alike, and my work began to garner attention in local design competitions. With each achievement, I felt a growing sense of independence, a belief that I could build a life defined by my own success, not by the shortcomings of my family. I even landed a prestigious internship at a renowned design firm for the following academic year, a milestone that filled me with pride and hope. Throughout all this, I maintained a cautious distance from my father. We had occasional, terse conversations over the phone, mostly about logistical matters or his attempts at offering me contrite apologies that never quite reached the depth of the hurt. He often muttered regrets about how he had stolen my future, but his words were as hollow as the promises he had made. My brother, Jason, eventually distanced himself as well, unable to navigate the complicated web of betrayal and family loyalty. I realized that sometimes, the only way to heal is to forge your own path, even if it means leaving behind the ones who were supposed to love you unconditionally. One evening, as autumn deepened into winter and the city was blanketed in a soft layer of snow, I received a letter in the mail from my father. The envelope, worn and creased, carried his familiar scrawl, a handwriting that once filled me with comfort. I opened it with trembling hands, and inside was a heartfelt apology. He wrote about the debts that had driven him to desperation, about the regrets that haunted him every day since he had drained my college fund. He admitted that he had been too proud to ask for help and too stubborn to consider the damage he was inflicting on me. "I never meant to steal your future," the letter read. "I was lost in my own failures. If you can ever forgive me, know that I am trying slowly to change." The words, so long overdue, left me conflicted. A part of me longed for reconciliation for the father I once adored, but another part remained guarded, scarred by years of betrayal. I did not immediately respond to the letter. Instead, I tucked it away, a relic of the past that I would revisit when I was ready. My journey had been long and painful, but it had also taught me the true meaning of resilience. I began to see that while my father's actions had forced me to fight for every opportunity, they had also ignited a fire within me, a drive to succeed that no amount of betrayal could extinguish. I dedicated myself to my studies, to my creative work, and to the legal battle that would eventually hold him accountable for his actions. Each step forward was a step away from the shadow of his betrayal and a step toward a future defined by my own worth. In time, I graduated with honors, my diploma a testament not just to my academic achievements but to the strength of my spirit. I received job offers that promised a bright future, and I began planning for a life that, while forever marked by my father's betrayal, would be entirely my own. I channeled my pain into passion, and every design project I undertook became a reminder that I was more than the sum of my past mistakes. Looking back now, as I stand in my modest office in a bustling city where I lead a successful design team, I realize that the scars of betrayal have become symbols of my resilience. My father's decision to drain my college fund was a profound betrayal, one that threatened to rob me of my future. But I refused to let it define me. I fought back in court, rebuilt my financial stability, and transformed my pain into a powerful drive for success. The victory in the legal battle, though bittersweet, affirmed that no one can steal your future if you have the courage to fight for it. I still see my father from time to time, usually at family gatherings where his presence is muted and his eyes avoid mine. He offers quiet apologies, and sometimes I sense regret in his voice, but the wounds remain. Forgiveness, I've learned, is not a swift process. It's a slow, deliberate journey toward healing. I have forgiven him in the sense that I no longer allow his past actions to hold me back, but I will never forget. His betrayal was the catalyst that forced me to stand up, to build a future on my own terms, and to prove that my worth is not measured by the money he stole but by the strength I forged in its absence. Every time I glance at my diploma or see the figures on our company's balance sheets, I feel a surge of pride. I grew my father's business to a phenomenal $75 million despite the odds, and even though he later smirked and said, "Your brother will take over now," I proved that my vision and my hard work could not be so easily dismissed. I carved out my own path, and through sheer determination, I made him regret every single moment of that betrayal. Now, as I sit by the window of my new office watching the city lights flicker in the evening twilight, I reflect on the long, arduous journey that brought me here. A journey marked by betrayal, heartbreak, legal battles, and ultimately, a triumph of spirit. My college fund was drained, my future stolen by the one man who should have nurtured it. But I made him regret it, not through revenge that burns, but by building a life so full, so rich in purpose and achievement, that his callous actions have become a distant, painful memory. This is my story, a tale of loss and rebirth, of a daughter who was forced to fight for her future and in doing so, discovered an unyielding strength within herself. I stand here now, a survivor, a creator, and a woman who will never allow betrayal to define her worth. Every scar is a testament to the battles I've fought, and every triumph is a victory over the darkness that once threatened to engulf me. And as I continue to shape my destiny, I carry with me the unwavering belief that no matter what hardships come my way, I will rise again, stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before.